Well, hi guys, we're back. Now, if you were tuned in to our conversation with founder and CEO of Paytm, Vijay Shekhar Sharma, well, he made a number of points, which you can obviously go through that conversation. But it all started off with two tweets by him. The first one being, after failing to win the war against India's open internet with cheap tricks of free basics, Facebook is again in play. And the second one, the one that he also tweeted out, was killing a beautiful open UPI system, the Unified Payments Interface System, with its custom closed garden implementation. This seemed to be, well, his point of view, and he made a number of points, which we will touch upon in this conversation. So we thought how best to analyze some of those points. We saw a lot of your comments coming in. So there's someone on Twitter who goes by the name of Nikhil Kumar, and the best way to introduce him is his Twitter biography, Building Bridges at India Stack. Nikhil, thanks so much for joining us on Bloomberg Quint. Really appreciate you taking out the time to speak to us. Now, obviously, you were tuned into that conversation, and you've also been tweeting about this particular subject. Now, when it comes to Vijay Shekhar Sharma's, well, allegation that, well, essentially what Facebook and WhatsApp are essentially doing is killing this openness by co-opting this open platform called UPI, something that you've worked on extensively in the past, and you've worked on UPI-based applications, you've worked on Bheem. Do you think that there's any merit in an allegation like that?
I think we have to give credit to VSS for basically, bringing digital payments in India to where it is, and all his concerns are legit in the sense to say that there are a certain number of features which are missing on WhatsApp from a UPI implementation perspective. So I agree to him calling that out, and probably the beta rollout could be even more staggered to lesser number of users. But I don't agree that it's a closed garden system. And here's my explanation for that. A definition of a closed loop system would be that you're using stored value account A to send money to stored value account B provided by the same service provider. For example, wallets were a great example of that. You could not send money from one wallet to another wallet. However, with something like UPI, we brought in interoperability, which meant that you could use any app to send money from bank account A to bank account B. So in my opinion, as a first principle of interoperability, I think WhatsApp is following it. In fact, I use my Paytm bank account on WhatsApp to send money to someone. I think the fact that something like that is being possible on a platform like WhatsApp shows that it's already interoperable. There are a number of features which are missing, and I hope with NPCI will work very closely with the team the payments team of WhatsApp, which is working on this, and ensure that they comply to all the other features as required by the procedural guidelines.
Right, it's interesting you make those points, Nikhil, but just for the benefit of those tuned in, let's break it down into a couple of points in terms of how you actually set up a WhatsApp Pay account. And I say that loosely because essentially if you're on WhatsApp and you go on the payment section, it can be done. And it's very different from, well, what we earlier, the past year and before that, when we were actually trying out different features of the UPI, we realized that there were things which turned out to be a little cumbersome, especially within bank apps, like entering your grid or all security stuff, but stuff that made it a little cumbersome to perhaps, come up with a VPA. It works differently on WhatsApp. It's a lot less cumbersome. It's a smoother UI. And we've been using it over the past, since Friday, all of us in office. It's been fantastic. But according to Vijay Shekhar Sharma, a lot of the procedural guidelines were not entirely followed. And he calls it, well, from the NPCI standpoint, he says essentially what the NPCI did was preferential treatment that was meted out to Facebook and WhatsApp.
I'm not going to comment on the allegation as I'm not aware, but let me explain to the users on how it works.
Yes.
If you look at the WhatsApp onboarding process, it's very, very similar to the way Bheem's onboarding process is. It's just that for a lot of us users, we have been using WhatsApp so often that it seems so intuitive and easy that we forget that the onboarding process is actually what is done on Bheem. So the first step of onboarding is basically someone's mobile number being verified. So UPI works on two factors. In India, you can't complete a bank transaction payment without having two factors as prescribed by RBI. So UPI is also designed to be a two-factor authentication system. And the first factor is your mobile number and basically the SIM card. So for you to get started on WhatsApp payments, what you really need to have is the SIM card of the mobile number, which is registered against your bank account. So the first step that WhatsApp does is it securely verifies your mobile number. Once it verifies your mobile number, it asks you to select your bank, whether do you have an account with Paytm, do you have an account with SBI or an ICICI. So the moment I click on SBI, it securely goes to the NPCI switch, goes from there to SBI and looks up for accounts which is against my mobile number, and SBI securely provides this. Now note, WhatsApp does not connect directly with NPCI. I think one of the things that has been missed in this debate is that every customer who's being acquired by WhatsApp is actually a customer acquired by an Indian bank, and that bank happens to be ICICI Bank. So the person who issues your VPA is the backend of WhatsApp, which is the ICICI Bank, and ICICI Bank in turn interacts with the NPCI switch, and then the switch from there on with other banks. So the first step is mobile number verification.
Just to clarify that first point, when you mentioned that, it's interesting because obviously ICICI Bank has partnered with them for this particular initiative. When you mentioned that, so when ICICI Bank was to be reporting the number of, well, new accounts, or should we call them VPAs or whatever, that they've actually registered on their platform, if, hypothetically speaking, 200 million of what India's WhatsApp subscribers were to start using WhatsApp for payments, it would essentially be ICICI's, the number of accounts with ICICI going up, right?
Absolutely, potentially, if WhatsApp decides only to work with ICICI Bank. Right. The beauty of UPI's design is that it allows an app to now work with multiple banks. As we have heard from various different reports, the other bank which is expected to go live with WhatsApp is SBI very soon. So it will be ICICI, SBI, and ABCD bank that WhatsApp chooses to work with. It might well as be Paytm bank in the future, because Paytm is also a regulated payments bank. So every customer that's acquired through WhatsApp is acquired by a bank. WhatsApp is only the front-end application that's allowing the bank to acquire a customer, and that has to be clarified to all the users. And this is important because all liability of transactions is taken care by ICICI Bank and not by WhatsApp.
Right. So that was obviously step one, and you were elaborating as well. But just to understand from you, based on this tweet, Nikhil, he says, Vijay Shekhar Sharma, VSS, says, and he said this to me just a while ago as well, essentially in a nutshell, after failing to win the war against India's open internet with cheap tricks like free basics, Facebook is again in play, killing the beautiful open UPI system with its custom closed garden implementation, which you don't seem to agree with. But he says, I am surprised champions of Open India Stack let it happen. Now, I was trying to get to the bottom of where that, the genesis of that thought at least. But from your standpoint, do you think that it's something that India Stack didn't stand for, considering that you've worked with them extensively on this particular interface? Does this go against what India Stack really was meant to do?
No, I think VSS has been one of the greatest supporter of India Stack. He has adopted eKYC. He's been a big champion of UPI, and we have massive respect for him. And at the same time, it is we have always believed that we have to build open systems in India, unlike countries like China, where payments is just dominated by just two players, or in the US, where there are just two service providers like Visa and MasterCard who dominate the payments there. So in India, the idea of creating UPI was to basically create a federated payments ecosystem. And I think we've been fairly successful in doing that. We have a merchant ecosystem which is being enabled by a number of startups. We have the consumer ecosystem that are being enabled by a number of startups. And we have a number of internet companies who have found this and have adopted these open systems. I think somewhere we forget that, we have to give credit to WhatsApp to adopting or to embrace an open system like UPI, because remember, they always had a choice of launching a wallet very similar to Paytm. They might well as have done that, but however, I appreciate the fact that they've adopted the UPI open system, because this truly enables interoperability.
No, that too, and also, it's interesting that you say that, Nikhil, because globally the narrative has been how WeChat, especially in a market like China, managed to come up with such a sticky app where users essentially are engaged and immersed in that app for everything. Practically all their needs are met by that app.
But remember, they're a closed wallet.
Yes.
You can't send money from a WeChat account
Absolutely.
to another bank account in China.
I want to clarify.
That's not
Absolutely.
the case with.
I want to understand that from you as well, because some opponents of this particular WhatsApp Pay also seem to suggest that this is also closed. Now let's figure out our definition of closed based on this conversation. You seem to suggest what people are saying is that essentially it doesn't matter whether you had an existing UPI account or a VPA, as long as you're on WhatsApp and you enable this payments option from your settings on WhatsApp and set up a UPI pin, that security bit is managed, which we'll get to in a bit as well. But after that, you through WhatsApp and obviously ICICI, like you mentioned, are on the UPI interface per se. But you can only send, any sort of payments, or you can only, transact in any way from one. Let's call it one WhatsApp user to another WhatsApp user, right? So you can't essentially be, paying someone in a Paytm app or perhaps, even other apps which are UPI enabled. That seems to be the criticism. Do you think that's a valid criticism, and that's why they're calling it a closed wall or a closed garden approach?
I think so. Let me try to explain this. I think the first definition of interoperability is, am I able to send money from my Kotak Mahindra bank account to Ayush, your ICICI bank account?
Yeah.
Right? Am I able to do that? That's the first question. So I think that test WhatsApp clearly goes through. The second one is interoperability between UPI apps. Mm-hmm. Am I able to send money using WhatsApp to my Bheem ID, or let's say a PhonePe ID or a Paytm ID? Now, in order for somebody to do that, on WhatsApp, what they've done is they have created a payments tab, and inside that payments tab, you have to go inside the bank account, and there is a 3-dot menu, and you click on that. There is a feature which says pay to a VPA. Now, the criticism about this particular implementation is that it is very cleverly designed that it is not accessible to the user, right? And that is where a lot of criticism is coming from, is because that paying to someone to another app is not very apparent to the user. And let me explain this why.
Right.
This is because WhatsApp is a very unique product.
Okay.
How many times in your daily use of WhatsApp have you even clicked on the status tab?
Yeah.
How many times have you clicked on the 3-dot menu on your WhatsApp?
That's right.
WhatsApp as a product is a chat product, and there is no precedence to a product like this, right?
Yes.
Whether NPCI or whether Paytm or whether anyone else, we haven't seen a product like this in India.
And especially with
this
that
is
sort of reach.
a very unique product. That's out of reach.
Yeah.
So it is their inherent advantage that they have a very simple user experience, and people spend so much time on that app every day. So the fact the enablement of payment today is between a chat conversation. That is, Ayush, you and I, if we are chatting on WhatsApp, am I able to send money to you easily during the chat? So that itself is a new use case for UPI that didn't exist before.
Yeah.
So the payments tab is where the issue is, and people are criticizing it that it should be done in a way that it's more apparent and it's more easily accessible to the user.
Yeah.
And I hope WhatsApp listens to this feedback and implements this.
Fair enough, considering it's a beta version. But just having said that, I'm opening my WhatsApp conversation with you, which is blank. But I'm trying to, when I go, I'm obviously on an iPhone 7. I hit payment, and
Ayush, I'll only reply to you if you only send me money first.
Unfortunately, I'm broke, Nikhil. But my point being that you've obviously linked a particular account. I have no option on this app particularly to edit Nikhil Kumar's account. So how do I send it to, perhaps, if I want to use it, and send it to your Bheem account, which would be, for example, Nikhil@UPI would be your account. There's no option for me to edit that right now in the beta version that I'm using. Is that something that a feature which will develop in the future?
Are you on iOS or are you on
iOS.
Android?
I'm on an iPhone 7, iOS.
On iOS, I suppose WhatsApp's beta doesn't include this feature.
Exactly.
But those who are on Android can click on settings, go to payments, and in payments you can choose your bank account, And when you choose your bank account, from the three-dot menu, you'll see something called Pay to a VPA.
Oh, awesome.
And I have put out the screenshot also on Twitter, where I have transferred money from my own bank account to Nikhil at UPI. To prove that interoperability between apps.
Very, very interesting, because that sort of shows the interoperability and proves the point that you were making.
I just want to
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to extend one more point.
Right.
It is not just to a VPA. I could even walk to a store where a merchant is a phone pay merchant, right? And his VPA is defined there, and I can actually type that UPI VPA and send money to that VPA.
Awesome. So what the point
you're
trying to make is
perhaps... I can even pay a merchant today. It's just that...
Perhaps the
user experience of making payment is not is difficult.
So essentially, what you're suggesting and what I'm trying to gather from all of this is that maybe this is early and premature when it comes to criticizing the service. It's just begun, and perhaps the best is yet to come. But let's bring one point up, which is a point Mr. Sharma, VSS, just made a short while ago in the previous conversation, which is the most crucial point. I've had 10 people in office come up to me and ask me the same question, which is about security. Now, he says that this is not secure at all. That is right down your alley, Nikhil. Do you think that a service like this, and this, when it is used by 200 plus million users in India, unsuspectingly, if that is a concern, that this is not safe enough? Is it because of the ease by which you can use WhatsApp and is it just because they have such a fluid and smooth user experience that they're being criticized, or are there genuine security concerns?
Absolutely. I think, if you look at the way wallets were designed, they were designed to increase the velocity of payments, because the more number of factors that you introduce for a payment to happen, there is high user friction and then there is drop off during a transaction. So one of the biggest criticisms India has always had is that we are a two-factor authentication system as prescribed by RBI. And because of which, digital payments had not grown exponentially in India in the last few years. So UPI is also based under the RBI regulation of two-factor authentication. The first factor is your mobile number. So like I explained, your SIM card, that is the mobile number, the SIM card has to be in your phone whenever you use a UPI app for you to do that transaction. So for example, if you're using WhatsApp and let's say you remove your SIM card and you try to do your payments, it should fail. That's number one. The second one is, the second factor is basically the UPI PIN as a factor. Remember, UPI PIN is something which is set up against your bank account. It is not app specific. You don't set it up on WhatsApp, or you can set it up on WhatsApp, you can set it up on Paytm, you can set it up on PhonePe, you can set it up on Bheem. But your UPI PIN is not restricted to an app, it is against your bank account. So for some of us who've already been using UPI, and if you had set your UPI PIN earlier, the WhatsApp experience seems magical, because they use the API to clearly define a user experience where, it already, the API in the response says this user has already set the PIN. So they skip that step because it's not required. However, when you try to send me money, they try to validate two things. They try to validate, one, is your SIM card inside, is it the same SIM card which is registered? And number two, they ask you for your UPI PIN. And remember, UPI PIN is also infrastructure that's developed by the National Payments Corporation of India as a common library. And you would recognize that the same UPI PIN is on Bheem, the same UPI PIN is on Uber, the same UPI PIN is on PhonePe, the same UPI PIN page is on Paytm. So that's the common infrastructure. I would argue that the risk is the same to any UPI app which has a UPI PIN page inside it. So whether WhatsApp is better at handling this or whether Paytm is better at handling it, I will leave it to them. But from a security perspective, WhatsApp complies to the two-factor guideline prescribed by the RBI and enforced by NPCI.
Very, very interesting insights, Nikhil. I'm really glad that we could do this. And for all of you who were trying to get some sort of reference point to the conversation that we had with Vijay Shekhar Sharma, it's obviously down in the particular thread wherever you're watching this, and it'll also be on bloombergquint.com. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned to Bloomberg Quint for more such updates.